when my work was described this way, sentimental, romantic, nostalgic, escapist, and so on, it was also joined up with land art. And so I completely reject both of these descriptions. And I found my opinion, I don't know what other people think, but my opinion was that in the 1970s, actually people didn't research at all walking in the world, because there have been walking cultures all the way through time, obviously. The original form of transport would be walking, but walking art, that's made by myself and one or two other people, was immediately said to have been influenced by Romanticism. And of course, I have never read one word about the European Romantic poets. That's a fact. I didn't ever do that. I had no interest. I saw no reason to read or research them. So therefore, my reading of this accusation is that I know nothing about them. So I disown this whole kind of idea. Because I think there's so many twists and interpretations that you can make about walking, and that walking doesn't have to involve land art, doesn't have to involve making things, it doesn't have to involve changing the landscape in any way. So this is a kind of double image that you can turn upside down depending which part of the world you're in. So as we're in the southern hemisphere, as it were, South America, so have it that way. When I would show the work in Europe or North America, then I'd turn it around and have it going the other way. But I tried twice to go to see this view from the summit of Aconcagua, highest mountain, highest point of land in South America. First time got into a very bad storm, 1998, not possible. White cloud storm. Go away, come back, try again. Weather absolutely perfect. So that's also interesting for me that the weather doesn't stay the same. You can come back and the weather can be different. I can be different. People can be different. Everything changes anyway. With regard to Denali, the one upside down on the lower image there, this is the highest mountain in North America, and it really. I really had the idea as an artist, a contemporary artist, that what I would like to do is I'd like to make a comment on US land art, since US land art was always about giant trucks, earth-moving equipment, bulldozers and so on, alteration of the desert, removal of giant boulders from somewhere in California to LA Mocha, for instance. Last year, Michael Heiser removed a giant boulder, I can't remember from where. Took 11 days, I think, trucks carrying this 350-ton boulder, a 250-ton boulder from one place to another. And then, anyway, they installed it in Los Angeles Museum of Contemporary Art. So that's an example of something that I personally wouldn't want to do. But I can see that doing that is very spectacular. So could gather a lot of interest. I understand that completely. The converse kind of point of view, which is the one I had, which was that I wanted to make a comment on US land art. And so I went with a commercial team, and we were lucky with the weather and got to the summit of Denali, which is in Alaska. So at the end of 2007, I had some meetings with people in Zurich, in Switzerland, to try to get them interested in fundraising and raising the money for me to be able to go to the summit of Mount Everest with an extremely good commercial expedition. And so I'm in two minds as to which is harder, gaining the money to be able to do this because it costs a lot of money, or actually going to the top of Mount Everest. They're both, for me, I felt they're both really quite difficult, because if you spend less money, so it's more economic, then your chances are also correspondingly less. I was told that it takes about 3 attempts with a normal company to go to the summit of Everest. So I thought, well, it's better to try and work with a good company. So therefore I had to go to Zurich and have meetings with people who they in turn would build a kind of group of supporters, art supporters. And so eventually, how did I do this? Because I didn't have the money to do it myself. I traded art for the economic support in order to be able to do this. It's very important that standing here like this, that I say a guided and Sherpa-assisted climb of Mount Everest, because there's no way that someone like myself, I'm not a mountaineer or a climber, I couldn't possibly consider this without the help of Sherpas, because these are extraordinary people, extraordinary abilities, but they also live at altitude, so they're already, their bodies, their biology functions very well at altitude, whereas I come from 50 meters above the sea, so very low. And anyway, so there's no way that someone like myself could ever reach the top without the help of Sherpas. That's correct point to make there. What you're looking at is actually the summit of Mount Everest, and this white shape like that is a Buddha statue. That what is on the summit of Mount Everest, I think, comes and goes and changes because of the weather conditions. This is a Buddha statue that people carried up there. Then it was wrapped with prayer flags and kata scarves, which are sort of like Sherpa Tibetan blessing scarves. And you can see that the man on the top left, that's one of the great Sherpas there, Angdorji Sherpa from the village of Pangboche, and you can see that at his mouth, he has an oxygen mask. This man, he also has an oxygen mask on the right, and the Australian in the middle, who's kind of slumped over, that red tube, that's also his the feeding in of the oxygen to his mask. So I'm fully aware that in the art world, when I have spoken very occasionally to people about going up Mount Everest, then people would say, well, yeah, surely you climb over dead bodies. There's lots of garbage, there's lots of old oxygen cylinders there. And then there are giant queues all the way up. Why bother? Why do it? Then when you would come to the climbing community, then people would say, well, it's not climbing. It's what a real climber calls, this is high altitude trekking. This is not climbing. So it's sort of they demote it, which is fine by me, because I can understand what they're saying. But for an artist going there, this is really amazing, fantastic experience. So now we go into the kind of the issue of mountains, and also a little bit of politics as well, because in the sunrise shadow, the photograph of from Popocatépetl in Mexico, you also see this this triangular snow shape, which is representative of the snow mountains in Tibet. This is the Tibetan national flag, which I took up to the summit of Mount Everest, but and also that when you're going up Mount Everest from the Nepalese side, that just near the summit, you cross by the balcony, it's called the balcony, an area quite close to the summit, and you actually step into Tibet. But there's no passport control, there's no one guarding it from a sort of police military point of view. It's just a sort of mountain. So so the issue really here is that this flag, which is the national flag of a country, cannot be shown in the country that it comes from. So if you can imagine in the United States after, I'm not from the United States, but if you can imagine after 9/11, how many Stars and Stripes flags were produced as a result of people's concern, upset for 9/11. So in this case, if a Tibetan was to walk into Central Lhasa and show the Tibetan flag and say, "Long live the Dalai Lama, independence for Tibet," then immediately the person would be taken away, put in jail, and then they would reject their treatment in jail. They would then be tortured, and so then it's a whole continuous issue that has been going on since 1950. So then, in relation to what I've just been saying, then I started to make works about Tibet and about the Chinese economy, since the interpretation of this really is that the Chinese economy pays the world to be silent. So there is no Tibetan justice and there is no Tibetan freedom, and that the Chinese economy pays and therefore silences all opposition. Even the UN is unable to do anything for the people in Tibet. And I don't know if you've been following the news, but there have been self-immolations inside Tibet now since 2009 as a way of protesting against the treatment of Tibetan people inside their own country, as I say, where they can't show their own flag, the Dalai Lama cannot go there, and so on. So then, this is another work on the same subject, but eventually I will be changing the subject. So the idea of this work, I made 2 works like this. The word Google, from a graphic point of view, not politics, Google has the same number of letters as these 2 names, which belong to a certain Tibetan. Champa Tenzin was a monk, and I went there in 2007, and I walked 7 times round Jorquencal Temple at night by the light of the September full moon, Lhasa, Tibet, 2007. This man, excuse me, Champa Tenzin, he was a Jorquencal Temple monk, and in the Bakor, which is a series of paths that go around the Jorquencal Temple. Jorquencal Temple is the most sacred temple in the whole of Tibet. It has the most sacred Sakyamuni sculpture inside it. So it's the most sacred place for Tibetan people, and they go from all over Tibet on pilgrimages when they're allowed to go there. But one day there was, in 1987, there was a big riot, and there is a police station actually in this court, this series of paths. There's a police station. So this man, Champa Tenzin, he could see inside the police station that there were Tibetan monks and nuns in there, and the police station was burning. So he ran in there and helped to get the people out to try to save them. And if you ever see any photographs of a Tibetan with his arm and fist in the air, then and being carried on the shoulders of other Tibetans, it will be this man, Champa Tenzin. But when you are inside Tibet and China, you can't Google and get information about who is Champa Tenzin, because he's a persona non grata. You know, he doesn't exist. So full stop. These kind of 3 diamond shapes, the graphics, minor point, but in Lhasa you can see in the architecture, in windows, in doorways and buildings, you can see these kinds of shapes. So that's where that comes from. It comes from a sort of domestic building architectural design shape. This work is in my exhibition at the Nara Roesler Gallery here in Sao Paulo, and this particular walk is a public walk. It was the idea of making a communal walk, because I've made solo walks. So that's one category. I've also made, also gone on to commercial expeditions, so that's another kind of a category. Then a third kind of a category is to work with other people in cities. So not landscape, not a solitary walk in a landscape, but a communal walk in a city. So a completely different experience, because often people say, oh, you know, you always walk alone and you don't share your experiences because you walk alone. So in this case, this is the reverse. You know, this is an example of the opposite. So what I did was I found a location which was like a square, an empty square, houses all the way around. And actually, it takes 1 minute if you were to walk the whole way around, you know, using the wall like that and going around the wall. If you were to go the whole way around, it would just take 1 minute. But in this case, each of the 4 sides of the 4 directions took 15 minutes. And one of the things which was, for me, very enjoyable and interesting on doing this was that nearby there were two cathedrals, and the clock in the cathedrals would strike on the 15 minutes. And so what it meant was that you would, you would walk. You'd be walking, and there is this wall, and you're just really hoping that any minute now the bell will go, and then the two bells ring, and then you change direction. So your movements were sort of dictated by the bells. So so it didn't require anyone saying, turn now. And it was a slow walk, so that was one idea that in urban spaces, I don't know what it's like here in Sao Paulo, but in certain cities, maybe northern cities where it's colder, I don't know, I'm not sure if this argument holds water, but anyway, people can be stressed about their lives. They must rush, they're always late. The clock is always demanding that you be somewhere, and you can't keep up. And so in this kind of state of mental rush, endless emails, phone calls, schedules, then in this case, then you're just taking 15 minutes to walk from here to that wall. Now this is the last slide, the last image, and this is the image from the project that I did with Alexia Thaler. And it concerns a walking kind of a project in the Atacama in northern Chile. And so in terms of graphics, not the actual walking, but in terms of graphics, by chance these two, one was a hill and one was a volcano that I went up. They both have the same number of letters as in Google Champa Tenzin. So the first hill that I went up, it's not a volcano, it's just a hill, a triangular-shaped hill. I went up there 7 times, as in the same way that I walked around the Barcor in Lhasa 7 times. But I did it on alternating days because I had no idea what the effect would be if I was to go up and down 7 times in succession. I wanted to make sure that I could do it, so I did other walks in the days in between. So I did walk for 14 days, but on these dates here from the 2nd to the 14th, those ones, then I went up and down Jorquencal. Then when you're on the top of Jorquencal, you see Licancabur, which is an actual volcano with a perfect volcanic shape. It's not part of a mountain chain, it's an independent shape, which is this shape here, the lower one. So the top one, obviously there weren't 7 mountains like that, so it's a different kind of a diagram. It's indicating 7 ascents of the same triangular-shaped hill. The bottom one I went, Licancabur, I went up once. But from the 5,916 meter summit rim of Licancabur, you can look across and you can see the other hill that I went up and down 7 times. But it's a kind of environment that I like very much. I felt felt quite normal and kind of not difficult to comprehend being there. And all thanks to Alexia Thaler for inviting me. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you.
Hamish, come and sit. Are you going to do the reading?
Well, I don't know. I think maybe I've said enough.
Yeah? I don't know. Well, we had in plan for Hamish to do a reading. I don't know how we're doing on time.
I probably used up.
Okay, so maybe we open to questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll open to questions. Well, I have one question.
Yeah.
And it's something that we look very much into when we were planning for the project in Plataforma Atacama. And it's the thing about weather, because Hamish doesn't stop walking when it rains, but if the weather conditions get really bad, I think it's quite a thing that you comment, like how the schedule for walking and the climate, is very different to the art schedule. So when you're doing a project, a walking project that expects you to have an exhibition at the end, what happens if the weather changes and how that can kind of break your structures?
That's really what I was meaning, that I put spaces between each of the 7 times going up Jorquencal just to make sure that I could do that. But it's the same kind of reason. But there in the Atacama, basically I was told that the weather would be quite stable. So it wasn't really that there could be a storm expected and that the plans would be interrupted. But it is definitely something that I have to deal with. And several times, not on this occasion, but I've gone, for instance, to Switzerland and made a series of walks in Switzerland, which were on an art schedule. So that the dates, can you come on this date for then? That's an art schedule, but the weather was no good. So this is, I think, what you're talking about, that when you make art which has to do with walking, because there's words about and is or of, that it's quite difficult to mix an art schedule with a weather schedule, and also how you feel. So you have to kind of learn how to try to juggle it, or from experience make a good decision. Even if it's a last-minute decision, can be good.
Yeah, because one of the things that Hamish says is like, if there is no walk, there is no art. So if he plans a structure and it gets broken, that's basically the question: what happens?
Yeah, because then it when the weather or whatever it would be would stop it, then I have to go back to number 1 again. I can't sort of if I want to go up and down there for 7 times, and after 3 days I'm ill. Then when I become well again and I start again, then I have to start back at number 1 again, not have a 5-day illness and then continue, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yes. Any questions? Jacopo?
I wanted to ask you about